Hello and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr, where we talk about the art and culture of running a record label. Today, I am speaking with Misra Records. Jeff from Misra. This is exciting. We have a cool little serendipitous story that we kick off with. It's just kind of crazy to think about. But anyway, you'll get to that. Thank you so much for being a listener and subscribing to the podcast, which if you haven't already, please do. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, then take a second to leave a review. That would be really, really nice. Same thing. If you can comment if you listen on whatever platform allows you to do that, on YouTube or whatever. I don't know if you can leave reviews on Spotify, but whatever. Visit our website, otherrecordlabels.com, where you can download some of our resources and check out our courses. I'd really appreciate that. Otherrecordlabels.com, including our brand new toolkit, which is available for free at otherrecordlabels.com/toolkit. I hope you enjoy this episode with Misra Records. Okay, here's what's crazy, and I'm excited to talk to you about this, because I have never interviewed a record label, and this is 110 or so episodes in, where the label and my label have released the exact same record. I think that's, well, not this label, but you specifically, with the J.P. Haney record. I mean, that is just the craziest thing, the smallest world.
Yeah, well, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, a little before my time, but that's such a good record. It's just so great to be associated with it.
Beautiful, yeah. And I mean, I at the time, it's funny, I don't know if I told you this, but I discovered that record because it was back in 2012, and I guess he had pressed it himself, and he had done this thing, which was probably a way to save money, where he had done the random color option. So the record came in various different colors and splits. And then he did his own jacket and everything with a sticker on it. And so anyway, he took these great press photos of it and of the whole vinyl package. And then I discovered it through Bandcamp's blog. And so this was back before they had editorial or anything. And they just had a blog, and so I subscribed like a nerd to their RSS feed, and these images came up, and I was like, wow, this is a beautiful looking record. I need to hear it. And so that's when I listened to it. It's honestly in my top 10 favorite records of all time. I just think it is unbelievable. And anyway, then I reached out to him and we released it. That is so crazy though.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I mean, it's just when you've lived in indie music long enough, you start realizing all these weird connections to people that you just kind of have maybe reached out to, and it's like, oh, we both know that same person, or we both kind of crossed paths on a record in some way.
I'm sure it's happened a lot, but for me, it's one of the stranger things, that's for sure. Especially because the album, I think, is so underappreciated and so obscure. So that's what made it a little bit weirder for me. Tell me about Wild Kindness, because that's the record label that released that J.P. Haney record. And then tell me about how you came to Misra. Explain this connection.
Yeah, so Wild Kindness was an Ohio-based label, Youngstown, Ohio, and my good friend David Krivnak actually started it. And about 5 years in, I kind of came along and started helping him with it. But that was something that originally was rooted in kind of the Rust Belt of the Midwest United States, more or less, Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, basically. And we started to branch out a little bit more and more because David just had this really phenomenal knack of connecting with people. I'm not quite sure how he did it, but J.P. Haney was one of those connections. And he was actually the guy who, through Wild Kindness, made the connection to Leo DeLuca, who at the time was in charge of Misra Records, which was based in Dayton, Ohio at the time, because that's where Leo was from. So he was basically, running it from, his, home, basically. And they had done, Wild Kindness and Misra together had done a 7-inch on Hullapaw on, I believe it's still their last record. It's Academy Songs Volume 1.
Okay.
And we did a 7-inch with them, and David was a graphic designer by trade, and kind of what happened was, in exchange for doing the cover art and all the layout work and all that stuff, it kind of became a Wild Kindness co-release with Misra.
I see.
And yeah, at that point, I kind of got sucked into the world of Misra. I kind of got under the radar, and I was young and ambitious, and I kind of certainly made that known, and so I kind of made an impression on Leo. I guess I didn't realize
that's awesome.
How much of an impression I made on him until he was kind of retiring from the music world. He kind of was, he had written a book, and he was kind of moving into academia, with that University of Ohio. So he didn't have as much time anymore. So, at that point he said, well, there's this guy in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who's, really impressive, that you guys should think about, asking to replace me. So that's when I got the call. That was 2014.
Oh, wow.
So, and we, a couple months later.
How long were you involved with Wild Kindness?
So I was at Wild Kindness for about 2 years at that point. So.
Oh, okay. And they're still a label, right?
Yeah. So kind of what happened was, I more or less, like, they're still independent of one another, but I kind of, part of the agreement for when me coming over, because I felt kind of exploited if I had just used Wild Kindness and all my friends' releases to launch my career in the music industry. I felt like I was building my reputation on the backs of all my friends.
Right.
So I kind of told Misra, I was like, well, you can have me if you bring everyone else too.
Oh, nice. Quite the negotiator.
So
what's the history of Misra, the record label?
So it's been around for over 20 years now. It was founded in 1999.
Wow.
So we've got, quite a storied history. So founded by Tim Bracey, who some people may know as someone behind the bands The Mendoza Line and The Paranoid Style and Slow Dazzle. Depending on how old people are, or what kind of music.
Sure.
And also founded by Phil Waldorf, who is better known these days for going on to have started Dead Oceans over Secretly Canadian,
right?
And is now doing Satisfactory with Phoebe Bridgers.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's incredible. So that was all the way back to 99, and you came in at 2014. I mean, 99 is such an interesting year to start a record label. I mean, hindsight is 2020. I mean, you can look back now and see how it all played out. But it maybe would have, I guess it would probably have been maybe just around the Napster time. Definitely file sharing was huge at that time. But you could still make a good living out of CDs if you could afford to make them. So, and CDs like hung around for quite some time after that, but that's a really interesting time. And so what was what were things like when you came on at 2014?
So it was, it was just a really exciting time because, I'm not quite sure how to explain it. I mean, like, I don't have a lot of formal training in terms of, music industry. So I just kind of, everything that I do, I'm just leaping into it.
Sure.
Really, I was a little bit starstruck because I was just sort of like, oh, we work with all these like cool names in indie rock. And, I got to go through the paperwork, and like, we've got the original contract between Misra Records, and Phosphorescent, like it's to put together the album that eventually came, was to become I'll Come All Right, but it didn't even have a name at that point. It just said title TBD, and it's like, this is like a historical artifact.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, just at that point we were kind of wrestling with all the forces and trends that, every other label is kind of dealing with in 2014. Certainly, just, Napster, or I'm sorry, you mentioned Napster 99, but now Spotify at this point was, becoming more and more of a thing, increasingly so. At that point it was, it was still important, but iTunes downloads were still a thing in 2014.
Oh yeah,
so that's
totally
what we have to remind ourselves of.
Yeah, actually, I think that I always try to remember dates and stuff, but I remember the fall of 2015 as pretty pivotal because that's when Apple Music came out, and they were offering, or maybe it was the summer, but it was around that time of late 2015 where they were offering like 3-month free trials with full access, no ads. And I just, that's when I felt like everyone just surrendered and gave into streaming. I mean, that's for me, that's when I remember.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely a thing where, when we're, we just kind of like look at our numbers and we're trying to do some kind of analysis, and, we're definitely like, well, we're making more money on, downloads, even if, downloads are less than, streams.
Right.
So, it was definitely more of a strategic thing, back in the day, and now it's just, streaming's obviously king, but I do think it's kind of, shifting back maybe at some point in the near future. So it definitely it kind of shows you that you have to kind of be versatile and, be willing to pivot.
Totally.
To survive.
Yeah, totally. I feel like, because I've learned my lessons, because, I remember one time we got on a Spotify playlist in 2011, I think maybe. Yeah, it was 2011, and it would have been like probably just when they were in Sweden. And I remember just being like, the artist told me that they got a Facebook message from somebody at Spotify that they were on a playlist, and I was like, I don't know what Spotify is, and who cares? But like, I've obviously that was a mistake, but like, it's taught me to pay attention to things, and when like $1 starts trickling in from a source, to like not dismiss it because it could be king in a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, it's super easy to make predictions and maybe be, something of a pundit.
Yeah.
Because, who knows really, I think, I don't think even Daniel Ek knows what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years with the music industry.
Yeah.
So, I think the smartest move is just to kind of be willing to just kind of go with the flow. You never know. And just really to make all the options available. So, I mean, when an artist says, hey, I want to release something on this platform, or, I want to put the album out over here, do this thing, I try to keep an open mind and say, sure, go for it, give it a shot.
Yeah, I totally agree. So you guys are based in Pittsburgh. Is that just where you're based, or is the entire label based there?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much based here with me. I kind of, forced to move myself. I just brought my own people on, more or less, and that's just kind of how it's been throughout the years. Whenever there's some sort of administrative change, that typically is how it shakes out. So, until, obviously before the pandemic, I would say like, yeah, this is where our offices are, except
right.
we're just doing everything over email.
Yeah, everybody is now. Yeah, nobody has a home base. Pittsburgh is interesting. I've never had a label from Pittsburgh, I think, on the show. I'm curious, like, what the music scene is like. I mean, I guess it's sort of irrelevant because record labels just serve the country and the world via the internet. So the home base doesn't mean as much as it did maybe 30 or 40 years ago. But what's the music scene like in Pittsburgh?
Well, I would say it's pretty good, but we're always trying to get better. I think the story of the Pittsburgh music scene is the story of, Pittsburgh itself, in the sense that, we maybe have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder, so we're trying to prove to the world, like, hey, come on, we've got all these great things going for us. And I mean, certainly we've got an amazing hip hop scene here in Pittsburgh. like a lot of historians will actually tell you that the West Coast sound, more or less originated because of Pittsburgh, producers and musicians who moved to Los Angeles. So even in the 80s and 90s, Pittsburgh's been having an impact. And it continues to this day, obviously Wiz Khalifa, Mac Miller, originated from Pittsburgh. We have a really great, not quite sure how to distinguish them, kind of like a, punk, emo, kind of like indie rock DIY scene.
Okay.
Certainly been getting a lot of attention from, outfits, even getting mentioned in Pitchfork and,
nice.
publications of that regard. Yeah. So, there's a lot going on. It's one of those cities where your mind doesn't immediately go Pittsburgh when you're thinking great music, but it's one of those cities where like you do a little bit of digging and you're like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I actually tend to think that like blue collar cities, I often think that they probably have something really special. They often do have like a really budding underground art scene. It's just something that has come up a few times, and so I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see like art scenes coming out of the steel factories.
Absolutely, yeah. We have what really drives it, I think, is we've got a lot of universities in the area too. And just with college kids in general, like they need something to do.
Yeah.
You just kind of get some bands together, play in a basement somewhere. And
sure. I've noticed that Misra has a few label services on your website, like distribution, licensing is there as well. Can you tell me how that works, and even something on the idea of the label group? Can you explain that to me a little bit? It's very fascinating.
Yeah, so basically kind of how that started originally was a friend of mine had a label down in Austin who was looking for some help getting his records over in Japan. And, we have worldwide distribution. And so I kind of devised this concept where I figured let's maybe more or less partner up and, I can kind of help you get this larger reach that you're looking for, kind of give
great.
You that kind of give you that boost up over the fence that you're maybe trying to find. And it's just something that we're doing because it's I'm just trying to help music out as much as I can. And for what's worth, I don't think he'd be embarrassed for me to say it. That was actually my buddy Tony Presley over at Keeled Scales.
Oh, okay.
And they've actually gone on to get their own. He kind of graduated.
Oh, nice.
To the point
That's
where
great.
He was able to, start doing really well on his own, and was, able to get his own distribution deal without, our help or anything like that.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that we work with as a result of that intention tend to be younger themselves. Like maybe. I'm into my 30s, so they tend to be maybe people in their 20s or just out of college or something like that. Or they tend to be, younger labels themselves. If it's a friend who, their label's they just started their label and they need some help. I'm kind of like, all right.
Well, I'm really interested in the resources that are available to record labels that are of this stepping stones type of nature that you're talking about, because a lot of times we look into services like distribution or even, higher end digital distribution. And there's a lot of these services that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month to subscribe to, or they expect you to have a certain amount of volume. They're just completely out of our reach. At the same time, I felt like there are certain labels or even DIY artists, but there are certain labels who have to use your word, who have graduated just using DistroKid or just using the same thing that's available to any bedroom artist. And so it's great to hear of, I really do believe there should be more services available to that mid-level just to help us all kind of grow and graduate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we more or less kind of improvised this one.
Yeah.
I mean, I think kind of what you're saying is spot on. I think the market is, absolutely demonstrating a need out there. To whatever extent we're kind of coming in and providing that niche on our own. It's it was a little bit unintentional, and like nowadays it's a little bit more there's a little bit more intent behind it, but I absolutely think that there could be even greater opportunity if some enterprising person was out there and kind of managed to crack the code for a lot more folks.
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah. And I mean, I've encouraged labels, younger labels, smaller labels, to offer their services and the experience that they've gathered to small DIY artists. And I get this all the time. I have friends who are DIY artists, and they just say, I have a recording, I did it on my laptop, and like, how do I get it mastered? Or how do I get it uploaded to, I mean, some really basic questions that I'm surprised they don't know on their own. But it's interesting that like, there are some labels who could offer label services. Is that what you guys do? Do you offer label services?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, we basically provide whatever people need. We're certainly playing that role, at least from time to time, I guess.
And this would be non-roster artists, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
especially through the city. Yeah, like if it's someone local, like pre-pandemic, I used to consider myself kind of like like the at-large pro bono like music consultant for the city of Pittsburgh.
Nice.
where I was like, like if you order me a PBR and as long as there's a drink in front of my hand, I'll keep talking and I'll like tell you anything you want to know.
That's great. Good for you. No, and that's so true. But like we really do need that. And I'm often surprised at how much is mysterious to new labels and new independent artists, and not only that, and like some really basic stuff, but also how they're we see them going down a really dangerous path, and we see them about to sign up to something that we know is a complete waste of money, or they're about to press 1,000 records just because the price point is good. You know what I mean? Like, or even the idea of pressing records at all at a certain stage is like, oh, just be careful, be careful. Just worry about their credit cards. So great.
That's something that I'm not sure what it's like right now. It might take a second or two for the landscape to settle, but that was something I would tell bands all the time, at least a couple of years ago, where like, people just want to get their album pressed on vinyl because bands feel like it's, you're a real boy.
Yeah.
If you're a real band, if you're pressed the vinyl. But I told them like, well, do your fans want to buy vinyl off of you?
Right.
When people ask me that, I'm like, well, what do your fans want? What is your customer base?
Yeah, totally.
Do they want CDs? Well, and even do they want to buy tapes?
Even that is a clouded question, because they've been told by one or two of their friends, oh, you should totally do vinyl. And so in their mind, they're thinking, well, 2 people told me I should totally do vinyl, so that equals 200 units right there. There's always this like hugely like bias,
Well, I think the cool thing, I mean, this always happens when I talk about music. I just fall down the rabbit hole.
Yes, please. I love it.
I do think that I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the Bandcamp's got that new model now where you can more or less fund a release with pre-orders on Bandcamp.
Right.
So that could be a real game changer, I think.
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't know at the time of recording this, I don't know too much about it. I haven't dove into it too much. I've heard some, I won't say the word negative, just a lack of a better synonym, but I have heard some things about it that, it may not work for everyone. It may be for a certain tier of artists who could actually generate that level of funding. But yeah, I mean, I think it's phenomenal. I think that going at it from the angle of pre-selling is a huge thing. And at the very least, I think that bands or artists or labels should really take some serious temperature of their audience, like you mentioned, and even as go as far as just pre-selling as many as possible to help you pay for your down payment before you even like sign off on the pressing.
Well, I think, and yeah, without knowing too much about the specifics and not having used it myself, I can't comment on the specifics, but it does seem like it's kind of formalizing something in that widely accepted world of we all just kind of know and love and use Bandcamp. Kind of something that I would tell bands when they'd kind of come to us and they're like, oh yeah, like let's do vinyl, you know, but without any sales history. Was like, okay, tell you what, you know, find 100 people who are willing to give you $20. And you know, we can talk.
We can talk. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like Bandcamp's, you know, kind of, you know, more or less implying that, but it's, you know, well, it's maybe doesn't sound as mean.
What I really want to look into, I mean, especially from a Canadian standpoint, but I love the idea that they're drop shipping. I love the idea that they are taking care of all of the logistics of pressing, and I mean, for you know, I've done a few pressings myself, and there's a huge learning curve. There's a lot of mistakes to be made. What the heck are you supposed to listen for on the test pressings? You know, the difference between CMYK, you know, all these things you have to learn. And for an independent artist, it could just absolutely totally complicate the process and totally overwhelm them. So I know that Bandcamp is charging a little bit of a fee that's kind of built into the cost per unit. And I shouldn't say I know, I think I've heard and I've read, but I'm not 100% sure. But to me, that's, you know, they definitely deserve a fee if they handle this stuff like, you know, getting the boxes for shipping, the taking the orders, fulfilling the orders, and just even the idea of communicating with the plant. It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, they might be still operating at a loss.
Yeah, it's possible.
You know, because, I think maybe a lot of musicians might not realize truly how much work that actually is. So, you know, without knowing the specifics, it's, you know, even if they are taking a cut, they still might be, you know, not truly giving themselves what they're actually worth.
It's good. I actually hope that they go the same route for cassettes. I think that would be great too. Like just a smaller thing. I love the idea of drop shipping. That's what I find to be really exciting is you handle everything and, you know, essentially pay me a royalty. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's something, I mean, I'm fortunate now that we have people working for us at Misra who kind of handle that.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Getting started at Wild Kindness, that was something where like I did not look for. It was cool for a while. Like with anything, it's kind of like fun to oh, we got orders coming in. But then like after a couple of years, you're like, I gotta go to the post office.
I know. I was just there the other day with a bunch of records, and there was a lineup of 12 people behind me, and it was pretty uncomfortable. I want to ask you about, as we're talking about this kind of, you know, younger label or stepping stone type of service, I want to ask you about distribution because it's a really tricky thing. A lot of us think we should have national distribution for our artists and our releases. But for me, as much as I'd love my records in every independent record store, I know my artists aren't touring or aren't well known and active enough to justify pressing 1,000 records and shipping them all over the world just to sit on a shelf. Maybe I'm being pessimistic, but can you talk to me a little bit about physical distribution for small labels and what you advise?
Yeah, no, well, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it's so funny. That's it, you know, when I was young and naive, people kind of told, you know, they talked about distribution as if it was like, it would solve all your problems, and you'd be.
It was the final goal.
Like as soon as you guys get physical distro, like, you know, the money just starts coming in, and you're good.
To interrupt you, that's how I felt as an independent artist when I first released my first CD. I thought, I am nothing if my CD is not available at HMV in the mall at the record store. So to me, it's like I still am not official until you can go to the mall, to whatever record store is in the mall, which is no longer there, and flip through and find my CD. So go on. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, obviously that's, you know, experience is just realizing that that's, you know, not necessarily the case. And it's as simple as, you know, I often tell people, you know, to make the analogy kind of complete in their minds. It's like, you know how, because you're talking about a small label, so it's like, or a musician. So it's like, you know how like you go around to, you know, you go around town store to store and you know, talk them all into, you know, doing a consignment deal for your new album. Yeah. You know, because that's what we used to do, at least when they're, yes. You know, when we were able to go outside. Yeah, so it was like before everything. Yeah, I just, you know, I drive around Pittsburgh to all the album and to all the record stores, and I'd be like, "Hey, I got a new CD," and they'd give me a little consignment form. It's like, "Yeah, here we took 5 of your CDs, okay, and yep, here you go. Yeah. Good luck. If they sell, they come back in a year.
Yeah, exactly.
If they sell, they sell. If they don't, they don't.
Yeah, and they're not going to tell you if they're sold out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I was like, so basically. Think of if you get a physical distribution deal, just imagine that times, you know, the whole country,
right,
or, you know, the whole world. Yeah. If you have international distribution. But so it's like you have access to that, which good for you, but it's not going to guarantee you any sales. Yeah. And the thing that I always have to tell, you know, whether they're a label or a small band, is like, you know, most of my time running the label, it's like I actually spent a lot of time thinking about selling points for albums that a record store could use to sell a record to a potential customer. Because you got to think, it's like, you know, we're based, you know, I'm based in Pittsburgh, PA. So I say, okay, well, you're a Pittsburgh band. Why does anyone in Texas or California care about you at all? Right. Yeah. Have you ever been to Los Angeles? Have you ever played a show in Los Angeles? Right. Why should a record store in LA carry your record at all? Why should anyone walking into a record store in LA carry your record or buy your record? You know,
and unless, so what, yeah, I was like, and so what's your solution for that? What does that look like?
Well, it's different for anyone, but that's really, you know, that's kind of the jumping off point, because, you know, maybe a lot of people, they're, yeah, we have toured, you know, maybe not to LA, but like, here's a list of all, you know, the places we've been up and down the East Coast, throughout the Midwest, down South, you know, and that's really helpful for me to take to our distributor and be like, okay, you know, this band is hitting all these regions. You know, we could even maybe set them up where they play a show in the record store if the store is up for that. You know, obviously, you know, it's a thing where, like, if you put them out on a display case, you know, someone might have seen them in a show, you know, fairly recently, because they're going to be coming through, and they'd be like, oh, I saw those guys. You know, I meant to buy the record at the merch table, but, you know, I didn't get a chance to. I'll grab it here. So that's obviously the main thing that people are thinking of, you know, and it could be a million other things too. It's like, you know, maybe you got a song on a TV show or a commercial, and people might know you from that, or maybe you've got some other, you know,
and so
kind of weird claim to fame.
Is it important? Is it important to put like a sticker on the front of a record so it's on the record store and say, you know, featured on this episode, or, you know, recently on tour with such and such? Like, have you ever? Is that one of the solutions?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, yeah. Like if you've got if there's like basically one big thing that you want people to know about your record, right? At which that they could, like, you know, someone's walking through the store, and we've all been in record stores, so you can kind of put yourself in these shoes where, like, if you see a sticker and it says like, as seen on this episode of this show, you can be like, oh, I watched that show sometimes. Yeah. Or, you know, just from our own experience, just off the top of my head, you know, we had a guy who was a big, you know, who was a regular on NPR Mountain Stage. Okay. So that was, you know, like just like a program on NPR here in the US. And so that was like a thing where it was like, Well, this might not be for everyone, but if you listen to NPR and you listen to that show, this might catch your eye.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you might not know that otherwise. So we really want you to know that. So we're going to put it on a sticker real big.
So asking you about distribution, if clarify something for me, if you have a distribution deal, quote unquote, to have your records in independent record stores all over America, does that mean that immediately your record is in every single store, or does that just mean does each owner or buyer at those stores have to be convinced to stock your record? How does that work?
It's the second one.
Okay.
There's no guarantee there. You're not guaranteed to immediately ship 10,000 copies of whatever your next record's going to be. To kind of boil it down to the simplest terms, it essentially means that record stores, across America, across Canada, have the option,
right,
to buy your record now.
Okay, yeah,
and it might be that still might be a massive leg up for your label, because it's a lot easier for people to become aware of your bands and aware of your latest releases now, which is certainly a good thing. And it certainly increases the chance that you might make a convincing enough pitch that certainly a much higher number of stores and of buyers will say, you know what, let's give this a shot. That sounds interesting. Let's order 5 or 10 copies and see how it does.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where, it's not, a license to print money. if you get a distribution deal,
sure.
It's kind of like everything else in the music industry that I certainly have found this to be the case. Every step up, like, you think it's going to be a reward and you think it's going to just make your life easier.
Yeah.
But really all this is an opportunity to work harder.
Yes. With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, it's like you think that like physical distribution is really just like it's going to be the answer to all your problems, and you're just going to be able to sell a ton of records and just kick back and relax. And really, it's more like, congratulations, you now have the opportunity to work even harder than you were before.
Yeah. Well, even if every record store in America wanted to carry my record and wanted to carry 5 copies of my record, immediately I would be flattered and I would think, oh wow, I've made it. And then I would realize, oh no, I've got to come up with $10,000 to press 5,000 copies of this record. Like, you know what I mean? All of a sudden it becomes the responsibility is back on me, and the risk is now back on me. It's yeah.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where you can kind of get a feel for, like if it's a really small record, there might only be, like 100 or 200. It's kind of like a little trial balloon almost.
Sure.
Just to see how it goes. Yeah, I mean, if like literally every store in America or in North America took 5 copies, you would have to be doing something, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Totally.
So I mean, you get a sense for those things in planning it out.
But basically, as far as I understand, it's a computer system benefit, right? That a fan would come into the office or into the record store and say, "Do you have so and so's new record?" And it's so obscure that they wouldn't have it on the shelf by default unless the owner was a fan, and they would type it into the computer and say, "Yep, I can get it on my next order on Friday." Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, well, it's that, or it's a combination of that plus, because certainly, the continuing appeal of record stores in 2021 is something of the the curator factor, where you go to the record store because that the guy behind the counter has really good taste in music. And before, you walked into the store and he says, "I got a record I think you're going to like," because he heard your pitch 6 months ago when you said, "I got, this new album's coming out. Here's everything you need to know about it." And the guy in that store said, "You know what? I'm going to give it a shot."
Sure. And are you, how can labels pitch to store buyers, or do distributors do that on their behalf? Like, how can a buyer be a curator? And I mean, at my local record store, he's very much a curator, and he posts on Instagram every day and plays records through Instagram.
Sure.
I think it's a great, it's a underappreciated method of music discovery. But how can record labels pitch a new release and say, listen, maybe take a chance on this? Is it sending a SoundCloud link or saying, hey, look at the Spotify playlists or whatever?
Well, it's through the distribution. You kind of cook up something that's just like a one sheet, basically. Okay. It's like a PDF of just kind of like, hey, Scott's got a new album coming out. Here's, pretty much all the facts and all the details that you need to know. Yeah. And here's why you should care about it.
Sure.
And there's a private SoundCloud link, typically. You don't really try to sell physical stores on Look-A-Tee Spotify play counts, because physical stores hate Spotify.
Good point. Yeah.
So you don't want to be like, dude, the lead single is blowing up on, this Spotify editorial playlist. I don't think that's necessarily going to win a ton of people over.
No, that's a good point. But Amazon loves it.
Well,
selling great on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it's a thing where a lot of, certainly independent record stores have regular customers. Like you mentioned, it's kind of something where, you kind of develop that rapport with people behind the counter and vice versa.
Yeah.
And, they have a sense of what may or may not do well in their stores. And they could also be wrong too. They never know.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Have you, this is a great topic, and I really appreciate it. I'm learning a lot, and I know there is a bit of a mystery in this process, because what we talked about at the beginning is there's a lot of small labels like myself who don't have access to national distribution or international distribution for that matter, and so I think it's good to kind of get grounded and say, okay, this is something I want to work towards. I'm not ready for yet, or maybe there's labels listening who are saying, hey, we're ready for this. I think we have some good reasons why people should stock our records. So I like this topic a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to move on. I want to ask you about streaming and playlisting. Sure. How have you adopted to that, or adapted to that? Just as things change so much, and we touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but is that something that, and touch on this as well, because I often think that some genres can do better on playlists than others, depending on how well your music complements different moods or activities. Have you found success with playlists?
Yeah, well, I mean, without fawning too much over Spotify.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, the nice thing about playlists, in general, if you want to talk about that topic, is that it's, there are so many. It's not like there's one playlist. Some are larger than others, of course, and there's some general interest playlists out there that they have. But you could certainly end up on, what a lot of people would consider to be a niche genre playlist that might end up wildly influential and impactful for your band's trajectory, or for that determines how well an album does.
Yeah, true.
We've certainly had that the case. Playlists are, they're very ephemeral in the sense that it's almost like TV and film licensing, because I tell people all the time, you can't really write a business plan.
Yes.
That says like, we're going to spend, $5,000, like on recording. We're going to spend, another couple thousand getting the album pressed on vinyl and CD. And then, the lead single is going to get picked up by Fresh Finds, and we're going to get, and then totally. We're going to, and then Pepsi's gonna give us a commercial, and
that's right.
We're gonna be in this car. We're gonna be in this car commercial, and that's how we make our money back. You you literally can't make a plan that says that.
That's a good point.
I ask people to be realistic when they're trying to figure these things out. It's something that obviously when it happens, it's great, and it does really well, and you want to lean into it. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of best practices, we're certainly thankful that Misra is distributed by Red Eye Worldwide, and they do an amazing job pitching all of our upcoming titles. And all distributors will have some kind of a relationship with the platforms, whether it's Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon. So they all tend to do some form of pitching, as I understand it. And of course, Spotify lets you pitch directly now too, so you don't even have to have distribution necessarily. And there's no right or wrong way, necessarily. Songs end up on playlists, without labels, without distribution.
Totally.
Someone's got a good song and someone at Spotify heard it and said, you know what, I like this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, there's not really a book that someone can buy that says, like, here's how you get a playlist for your, for every song you ever want to put out. That's not going to be the case.
Well, I like what you said, and I've been guilty about, writing a business plan for a record and saying that we're going to pitch it to playlists. And, that's just such a intangible thing. And I've been guilty of that. And even just thinking, if I have a record coming out, I'm going to do a handful of pre-release singles. The amount of money I make on this record is totally based on luck. It's just whether or not somebody picks me, somebody is kind to me on that day that they get pitched, because it can really, mean whether we pay back how much it costs to make the record or not, whether or not we get put on some of these. It's such that's what I really hate about it. I do love this passive listener culture out there that I think complements the active listener who are on Bandcamp or in the record stores. I do love this marriage. I think it can work, but gosh, it's just so mysterious still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly something where it's difficult because it's kind of it's a little scary, frankly, that someone can make or break the album that you may have spent years working on just because they're in a bad mood.
Yeah. Well, I've heard crazy things about some of the mega playlists, like some of the your favorite coffee house playlist, talk about make or break. Like if somebody, whatever employee it is decides to put it on, like instantly you're getting fans for life, and you're making, hundreds and thousands of dollars in the couple of weeks that you're on it. It's just crazy. I wish I had a friend there. Wish my roommate worked there. Here's a segue, because I'm overly focused on streaming, and I shouldn't be. And what I think about what it can do, good or bad, for a release, and I probably overlook areas of the industry that could help my releases and my artists. Is there something that comes to mind that you have found works for your label and your releases that is maybe generally overlooked, as all of us are so distracted by playlists maybe today? Maybe it's vinyl. In your opinion, is there something that some labels are overlooking?
Well, yeah, I don't know if anyone's overlooking it, but I mean, it's kind of, I would put it in that category of, it's a cliche, but cliches exist for a reason,
right?
Kind of
Good,
thing, where it's like, I would say that it's touring. I have really, I mean, if you want to talk about writing a business plan and coming up for a way to, recoup what you put into a particular project, I've really not found and that's not right or wrong. It's just kind of how things are. But a lot of it will go back to touring, and not just, the fact that, people will buy the album at the merch table, hopefully, but it's also due to the fact that, if you're doing a lot of touring and you're doing it in a large enough geographic area, that'll certainly increase the number of people that have heard of you and might want to request your album when next time they go to the record store, or if you're lucky enough to have some kind of distribution arrangement, it's something where you'll be able to, people will order more copies of it from record stores, and that'll drive streams. Certainly they've, proven, I think, time and time again, streams go up, in areas where, bands have recently been to town.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it just really becomes a positive feedback loop. And there's not really a silver bullet for, anything in the music industry. If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah, that's true.
But in as much as, there's something you can do to, really help your career out, it's just, playing a lot of shows, playing to a lot of people, really as much as you can, or as much as other people let you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it is like, one of the older promotional techniques, but I think so much of us in the social media age are looking for the quickest and easiest and frictionless way to promote our music. But everyone's doing that. And so posting on Twitter that we have a new album out, or putting the cover on Instagram, everyone can do that. And people are doing it a few times a second all over the world. Touring is something that is still, because it's so difficult, it almost provides you with a bit of an advantage, I guess.
Right. Well, the kind of the beautiful thing about it, though, is to an extent it is kind of democratic, though, because that is kind of like advice that you kind of can give to any band in any situation, and you can never stop giving that advice to a band. Really, it's never going to be bad advice, no matter what level you're at. And I mean, if regardless of genre, regardless of like really anything about your situation, I don't want to be ableist or anything like that, but most people should be able to, if you're a band, you should be, performing shows, and just if you're willing to work for it, good things can happen for you.
Well, there's a real intimate connection that happens when you see someone live by accident as an opener, or a friend drags you out, and that you just do not get on a Spotify playlist. And I have had people reach out to me and say, I discovered you on an algorithm, and, hopefully I have them as a fan for life. But, that connection that happens in a venue, on a night, in a show, is really special. And hopefully it can actually translate to them following you on Spotify, following you on social media, so that they check out every record that you put out in the future.
Yeah, and I find that social media really kind of follows those interactions. I don't know, and certainly there are lots of exceptions to this, but I think that the most powerful connections, like you were saying, are because someone saw a live performance. I don't necessarily know how strong those ties are if someone just kind of discovered a YouTube channel, or YouTube might be different. That's a different content. But,
I know what you're saying.
If someone finds your Instagram or your YouTube and it's just it's kind of funny, I don't necessarily know if you have those people for life in the same way that you just mentioned that they saw you at a show and they thought you were amazing, and they bought a T-shirt.
Yeah. No, that is a great point. And I love that. That's something we don't talk about a lot on this show, and in the modern time, obviously during the pandemic, it's lost. But a lot of us are, like I said, are just looking for cheaper, easier, ways to reach people. But that's a good reminder that touring is difficult, and it's a cliche, but for a reason. I think that's very wise.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of things in life as I get older, I realize, like, well, some things are boring and true, but they're still true.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and even just if it's painful, it's probably working. It's like breaking a sweat. It's like at the gym. Like if it hurts, then it's probably good for you.
Well, yeah, like I said, like I occasionally get accused of when I advocate the band's tour, people, think it's a socioeconomic thing, and it's like no one's saying it's easy. Like I said, if it was easy, like every band in the world would be
sure.
be famous. But it's
So you're
it's
saying
one of those things. Yeah.
Are you saying? Sorry to interrupt. Are you saying that losing money on the road, which I would imagine is pretty inevitable for new bands and stuff, but losing money or at least being in the black or the red, but in the black, would you say that that's worth it then? That's an investment in your long-term career?
I would say it depends on how much you're losing and for how long you're losing money. As someone who's kind of, on the East Coast of the United States, I would advise people, from the East Coast not to get in a van and drive directly to the West Coast.
Sure.
in California. I wouldn't tell people to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on what'll ultimately amount to a vacation.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
I try to, and it's when I tell people, especially like a small band or someone just starting out, touring doesn't mean, drive to Toronto, drive to New York, drive to Chicago.
Yeah, good
drive
point.
to Los Angeles
with a hotel in between.
Yeah, right. It's one of those things where it's like, especially, east of the Mississippi River, you've got little towns, like in Pittsburgh, it's like we've got little towns, like every 50 miles.
Interesting.
So it's like, I didn't say, drive to Manhattan and play in front of two people and the bartender,
Right.
I said drive to Altoona, Pennsylvania.
That's a good point.
and play a show there.
That's interesting. And maybe we should do a whole episode on touring, because I do think of the first thing you said, which is getting in a van, driving for 8 hours. Now, this is me coming from Canada, where we have just much bigger landmass and nothing in between. But I like just, driving for a long period of time, getting out, playing a show, packing up, staying at a friend's house or in a hotel. But in a way, I mean, there's parts of America you could really stay at home, drive out an hour, play a show, drive home, and do that with a lot of surrounding cities or towns.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would say at a certain point, I think probably once you cross the Mississippi, it starts getting a little far out. Like, sure. I mean, if you're a band, just, from, Oklahoma City or Tulsa, or from, somewhere out in New Mexico or Panhandle of Texas, it's, my heart definitely goes out to you, because it's going to be a lot harder to do what I'm advocating here.
Right.
But, a band in Philadelphia, really doesn't have an excuse that they can't play a town, 2 hours away, and be home that night after making, okay, well, maybe you broke even because you got $100 or whatever like that, and gas was 75 or something. Yeah.
That's a good point. That is a really good point. I think that's a good idea to relook at touring. I just think the word touring makes you think you get on the road, you don't come home for 3 months, and you only have one shower. But it doesn't necessarily have to look like that.
Yeah, I think that there's, a lot of opportunities out there for people who are willing to kind of maybe, put that image in their head aside and are willing to put in some hard work, especially when I was younger, I used to look down on cover bands, but you know what? I know several people who pay mortgages playing in cover bands.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I know a few as well. No, that's all good point. Hey, listen, thank you so much for doing this, Jeff. This has been really enlightening. There's been a lot of stuff that we've covered that has been really helpful. I'm glad we got to camp out on that distribution thing, because I saw
for sure
those label services, and I think it's so great. Thank you so much for doing this show. I'm so glad to finally get you on here.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Anytime.
And thank you all for listening. Make sure you go to MisraRecords.com, which is MISRA records.com, to check them out and check out all of their great releases for how long they've been around. So incredible. And please visit our website, otherrecordlabels.com, where you can sign up to grab a few of our resources if you're thinking about starting a record label. Also, tons of resources for if you've been running a record label for 10 or 15 years. There might be some stuff that can help inspire you or get you back on track, get you organized. So visit otherrecordlabels.com, and thanks so much for being a listener.